MS Project users do have a tendency to overuse constraint dates, which ultimately could have a negative impact on plans and their ability to reschedule and react to progress and slippage accurately. Now, constraint types restrict the allowable start or finish date for the task, and again could negatively impact your plan if not used sparingly or correctly. You can assign one constraint per task, and fundamentally you've got things like hard constraints, moderate constraints, or flexible constraints. If you specify a constraint other than as soon as possible or as late as possible, enter the appropriate date in the constraint date box. However, please ensure that you understand what the constraint type will do and how it could potentially cause scheduling conflicts within your plan. So, constraint type definitions, let's walk through them one by one. As late as possible. With this flexible constraint, project schedules the latest possible start and finish dates for the task. Given other scheduling parameters, this is the default constraint for new tasks for a project scheduled from the finish date. As soon as possible. This is another flexible constraint where project schedules the earliest possible date and finish dates for the task. Given other scheduling parameters, no additional date restrictions are put on the task, and this is the default constraint for new tasks for a project scheduled from a start date. Finish no earlier than. So this is a moderate constraint indicating the earliest possible date that this task can be completed. It cannot finish any time before that specified date. For projects scheduled from a start date, this constraint is applied when you type a finish date for a task. Finish no later than. Another moderate constraint which indicates the latest possible date that this task can be completed. It can be finished on or before the specified date. For projects scheduled from a finish date, this constraint is applied when you type a finish date for a task. Must finish on. This is a hard constraint or inflexible, which indicates the exact date on which a task must finish. Other scheduling parameters such as task dependencies, lead or lag time, resource leveling, and delay become secondary to this requirement. Must start on. Another inflexible constraint or hard constraint, which indicates the exact date on which a task must begin. Other scheduling parameters such as task dependencies, lead or lag time, resource leveling, and delay become secondary to this requirement. Start no earlier than. This is a moderate constraint which indicates the earliest possible date that this task can begin. It cannot start any time before the specified date. For projects scheduled from a start date, this constraint is applied when you type a start date for a task or drag a Gantt bar in the Gantt view. Start no later than. This is another moderate constraint which indicates the latest possible date that this task can begin. It can start on or before the specified date. For projects scheduled from the finish date, this constraint is applied when you type a start date for a task. Constraint date specifies the date associated with a moderate or inflexible constraint. Selected in the constraint type box within the task information on the advanced tab, all constraints except as late as possible and as soon as possible require a date to be entered. So remember, because constraints affect scheduling, It is best to use the date constraints such as must start on or finish no later than only when required by conditions external to your project. Otherwise, just let project calculate the project schedule based on task durations and dependencies. Now, let's look at these constraints in practice within MS Project. So first, I want you to create a new project starting on the 4th of July 2022 with 5-day durations for each task, dependencies and resources assigned as per my plan in front of you now on the screen. So pause this video and then restart it once you've created this plan, and again save it as something memorable on your machine. Let's look at constraints now that you've built that plan. So the first constraint type we're going to look at is a moderate constraint, which is start no earlier than. So to do this, on task number 5, we're going to double click on validation. On the advanced tab, we are going to set the constraint type as start no earlier than from the drop down. And then in the constraint date, I'm going to enter the 15th of August 2022 and click OK. As you can see, it's moved the task out to the right because the start no earlier than. So before it was starting on the 1st of August, but because we've set the constraint type to be start no earlier than the 15th of August, it then moves that task out on validation to the 15th of August. Now, a possible reason for using this setting or constraint is because a resource is not due to start until that date. So for example, our assigned resource Bill Street is only available from the 15th of August for our project, and therefore this is where you possibly would use something like this within your project. Again, with all these things, any type of setting that you've changed or the dependency types, etc., make sure you maintain notes on this, and you can maintain notes within MS Project, for example. So I can double click within here, go to the notes tab and say is only available on the 15th of August. Like so, for example. And again, you'll see there's an icon now within here that's got the note icon as well. And also you can see this calendar icon that represents the constraint. So with a blue dot on the right indicates it's a constraint that's been added, which is a moderate constraint. And the note icon, I can hold my cursor over that note, and as you can see, there's the note that would appear for you, so you can see that note also. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to delete that note so I can continue with the demonstration. Now let's look at another constraint type. So first thing we're going to do is, where you can see this flexibility, is I'm going to change the project start date to the 25th of July 2022. So again, on the project ribbon, project information, and I'm going to change this to the 25th of July, like so, 2022, and click OK. Now, what you can see is that it's now moved that validation task from the 15th to the 22nd. So remember, start no earlier than the 15th means it can move it to the right. I move it to a later date, and that's why project has moved this. Now let's look at an inflexible constraint. So I'm going to set my project start date back to the 4th of July, project ribbon, project information, change this back to the 4th of July, like so, and click OK. I'm then going to double click on the validation task again, task number 5. I'm going to go to the Advanced tab, and I'm going to change the constraint type to Must Start On. And then I'm going to set the date on here to the 1st of August 2022. Now, a possible reason for setting a constraint like this could be due to an external dependency. For example, a milestone representing an incoming deliverable from another project is a reason why you might use a constraint like this. I'm going to click OK. And because of the inflexible constraint, we will be prompted with a warning message like this, telling us that we could potentially have scheduling conflicts. We are going to continue with the Must Start On constraint and select that and click OK. Now you can see that the calendar icon has gone from a blue dot to a red dot, which indicates an inflexible constraint has been applied to this task. Now you can see we've got the 1st of August here, so let me move the project start date to the 11th of July and almost simulating slippage on the project. So again, project ribbon, project information, and I'm going to change this to the 11th of July 2022, so moving to the right and click OK. It's telling me there's we've got a problem. I'm going to say continue and allow it and click OK. So what you can see here now is that because of that inflexible constraint, project is unable to move the validation task to the right based on the dependency on the construction task. So this is where you can see a problem with inflexible constraints, and this is where you get a thing called negative slack between two tasks, which is not good in any project. Now there is a way to override and compensate for constraints and allow project to adapt if it creates scheduling conflicts. If I go to File, then Options, then on Schedule, and here where you got tasks will always honour their constraint dates, is if I untick that, projects will honour those constraint dates until it impacts a dependency, i.e. creates a scheduling conflict, negative slack. And if I click OK, you can now see that project has now moved the validation task, even though there is an inflexible constraint on there. And on the left hand side, it's giving you a warning that there is a problem against a constraint. So again, finally, you can choose to switch this task constraints on your task constraints, so project will only honor that constraint until a negative slack situation has been created. But I think overall, just watch how you are using these constraints. So hopefully that's give you some clarity, and also giving you appropriate caution on when you're using constraint dates. And even if you type in, when you have a habit of typing in the dates in the start and finish column, that will create a constraint. So if I type if I go into here and type the 26th of July 2022 and hits return, again you can see it's created a constraint type. Unwittingly, I've created a constraint type. So just be aware of how you're entering information and how you're moving dates, etc. As I say, I feel it's better to let project do the calculation based on the duration, on the work and the dependencies that you've created within the structure of your plan, and let it calculate for you.